So, I mean, this adventure, it just has like an orc who's carrying a pie. Uh,
Hi! I attack the orc.
Hello, welcome to Geekery.
I am InkBlitz,
I'm the Gneech.
and this week we are talking about expanding the written adventure, taking
Yep,
what is already written, say from anything that Wizards of the Coast has made, or you find on DM's Guild, and going beyond.
yep, yeah. And this is one we had requested by a viewer, so
You.
we're always happy to address that. So, yeah. So, when you're coming up with a campaign, most DMs usually start with, a like a starter set or keep on the Borderlands or something like that. Um, because you're sort of learning the ropes, and
Right.
after a while, you want to expand it. You want to make it more personalized for your group. And some DMs, they just want to do everything all new original material.
That's okay too.
Yeah, in the earliest incarnations of the game, you didn't have adventures out the wazoo. That became a thing they created later when tournament gaming started to be a thing. But in the earliest iterations, the dungeon master had their dungeon, and lots of people would come from all over and go delve into that dungeon, and so they would build it all.
And a
Uh,
lot of the pre-made stuff now that comes out of Wizards of the Coast came
yeah,
from those original settings, from those original
yep. Or
campaigns.
they're like modern echoes of
Modernized.
that. Yep,
Yeah, when I was first starting as a DM, I started out with just all prepackaged stuff. Everything I've everything that I started with, I took from either the DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG, and we ran through it. And then it took longer than it should have, but it also sparked more ideas. And though my original campaign didn't go anywhere, it I expanded beyond what was in those um, original writings, and you have to, because your players will go beyond that. Anything that you set
yeah,
out, any little thing that you pull in from a pre-written campaign or adventure, your players will go beyond it. Expect them
yeah,
to.
yeah. Um, and pre-mades are like a salad kit or something. They're a bunch of ingredients you can use
Right.
to build a campaign. And when it comes to like homebrew versus pre-written, I'm like, why not both?
Both of them.
You
Do
know,
both.
uh, they both have room. And there's when you're expanding on the adventure, you can think about expanding on the current adventure. You can also think about like tying pre-mades together into a campaign. We're going to talk about both aspects a little bit. So one of the most handy ways to use pre-made adventures is sort of an emergency backup if you have like a big campaign idea in mind and your characters suddenly need something to do in their third level, and your campaign requires them to be fourth level before they can fourth or fifth level before they can hit the next part. You just pull out a pre-made, and a campaign like that might look something like Skyrim, where you have the main story of Alduin and you have the main story of the Civil War, but then there's also like the Wolf Queen Potema is being resurrected in a cave over here. It's not related to the big
No,
campaign other than sort of background information, but it's an adventure to go on.
it's
You
something to
know,
do.
um,
It's something to
you
level
know,
up your skills a little bit.
yeah, or if you imagine a campaign set in solitude, right? And you've got your characters fighting with the Civil War and your characters trying to save the world, but also they're going into the north wing of the castle and being plummeted into the mind of Pelagius, right? So
It's always
these
fun.
are all just
That's good
yeah.
for a
So
trip.
yeah, the these little sort of self-contained adventures that you get out of pre-mades um, can be a great way to sort of fill a gap, and you can also string a bunch of them together. I ran a campaign, a Greyhawk campaign that was literally uh, every adventure was something I pulled out of Dungeon Magazine, and I had strung them together with a narrative.
That's
And
basically what my Everkeep has been. We started
yeah,
out with I started out with a world, a city that was pre-made, and I built up off of that. So you take the original. There was no adventure with it. It was just a city. There was a hub with some basic NPCs, which I threw out and brought in my own. And from there, I
well, I love Telecane, so
well,
I'm all for
Telecane
it.
is my own. But from there, I
Yeah.
created the Adventurers Guild, and in that point, I added in just other pre-made adventures, tacked them in there as the players moved on through this, and they represented jobs that came in through the Adventurers Guild, minor jobs like cleaning up a hub, cleaning up a brewery that had been taken over, um,
Yep.
and from there you just go on to bigger ones. You go on to bigger ones, and you tack them on, and you weave them into the story, and the hardest part of that is to really prevent them from not making sense. So even though you are bringing in different campaigns and pre-mades from these different areas, you still have to kind of weave it into the setting properly so they fit. So that means taking out NPCs, bringing in NPCs, making it so it flows more coherently.
Mhm. Or just the adventure has a wizard in it. Your campaign also already has a wizard in it. Well, guess
Guess
what?
what?
The one that in the adventure becomes the one that's already
It's the
existed
same
in your
wizard
campaign.
now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the wizard that did
Um,
it.
yeah. The other sort of version of this is taking an enormous pre-made campaign and populating it with your own stuff or fleshing it out. Now, I did this in a big way with Storm King's
Yes, you
Thunder.
did. Especially when
Storm
it
King's
turned
Thunder,
all sandboxy.
yeah, Storm King's Thunder. For those who have not experienced it, has this sort of middle chapter where you're basically told, "Here's the North. Go have fun until you hit fifth level." And it has a bazillion little encounters all over the place.
Just do whatever you want.
Um,
Let your players have fun. Go free. Fly free.
yeah, yeah. And most of the stuff that's in there is not an adventure. It's
Side quests.
this guy has griffins.
Conveniently, we
Okay,
have a
so
griffin.
yeah, if you want to get griffins for your party to ride around on, this guy has them. It's like, well, that's not an adventure.
That's
That's a
nothing. That's a blurb.
yeah. So when we actually went through Storm King's Thunder, I had to fill in a lot of stuff around that piece, and so uh, I did a couple of different things. I had set it in my own campaign world, so I had threads from previous campaigns that I could pick up on.
Right.
Um, like you went down into the dungeon with where the Drow merchant was at the bottom
Yes.
of the dungeon.
Yes. When we
He,
sidestepped the entire dungeon.
yeah. Well, I mean that dungeon was you could approach it as an assault, or you could go in and haggle with the merchant. It was his lair, but he was a character from a previous campaign.
Right.
That I was like, well, they're here, he's here. We'll set up a reason for you guys to go see him. And then there was another one where you guys were uh, helping the Thane of Acholt uh, go hunt this enormous
Yes.
mutant bear
Yes.
that had been terrorizing the countryside. That was a Dungeon Magazine adventure from way back. The Dungeon Magazine adventure was just, here's the bear and its goblin keeper in a camp. Go kill it, right?
Have fun.
Um,
Knock yourself out.
yeah. So that particular adventure has sort of both going on. It was a pre-made, made that I inserted into Storm King's Thunder to flesh that out. But the pre-made itself was also very small, so I fleshed out the pre-made and I made the whole business with going down into the barrow
And
at
that
the end.
really outlines a lot of the things with massive pre-made campaigns is that are coming out of Wizards of the Coast. They're good, but they are sandbox. You're
Yeah.
given things, you're given clues, you're given little snippets, but you're not given
Yeah.
full on quests. You're not given things
Yeah.
to,
They're very high level
yeah,
outlines for
you're
the most part.
you have the main quest, but you need something for your characters to do before they get to the main quest. To flow between one place to another. And a lot of these massive campaigns have just little snippets. But
Yep.
you can really grow upon those with smaller premates, smaller,
Yeah.
like puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
You're missing a piece here. You're missing a chunk here. Well, let's go to DM's Guild and see what's either free or you can buy, and
Yeah.
slide them in there and shove them into place.
Yeah, and when you're looking for stuff like that, or when you're sitting around trying to come up with ideas, one of the things I like to do particularly is look at my characters, the player characters, is uh, the BIFs. They're called the bonds, ideals, flaws, and traits. All right, and because the larger campaign is usually very impersonal.
Right.
It's something like saving the world. You want to weave in stuff that makes it personal for your characters. And so one of the adventures in Storm King's Thunder, uh, I went to your character's backstory.
Right.
Your character was this warrior from a sort of a Athens-like island nation, who had been transformed into a griffin before the campaign started.
Yeah, and the entire area had been invaded by
Yeah,
this other nation, which is very territorial and very magic and focused, and
yep,
very dark magic focused. And so
yep,
there had been this mage from there that had built up part of an army and decided to, well, we're going to take over this port of call and make it our own. And
yeah,
so, uh,
yeah. So that was the character's backstory.
right.
That that we could have gone through the whole campaign without that ever mattering.
Nope.
But I needed a an adventure, and I was like, well, why don't I have that mage show up again? So I created an adventure in which that mage appeared, and turned out was actually a Yugoloth in disguise and all this other
I'm
stuff
sure
going
they're
on.
all
But
Yugoloths in disguise from that area.
yeah, yeah. But the point of that is, so I was sitting around trying, well, what are they going to do this week? Aha, you know, Blitzy has this backstory piece that I can pull out and build an adventure on. So,
And doing it that
um,
way really helps intertwine the story, even if it's just a sidestep story. It helps intertwine the
yeah,
story with your characters. So by using these bonds, ideals, and flaws and traits, which people tend to forget, DMs,
yeah,
the characters, the players, we make them when we're making the characters, and we forget about them.
yeah,
But they're prime real estate for DMs to do basically anything you want. If it's written
yeah,
down on the character sheet, use it. Don't have to tell
yeah,
the player that you're going to use it. Just use it.
yeah. And some of that is sort of learning to think that way. D&D has never really been in a big way about the story of the characters compared to like later sort of storytelling based games like Hero
Right.
or the World of Darkness games, etc. But because I went through all of that stuff while it was being developed, I think in terms of the character backgrounds and stuff. Um, I love doing that because then the story is yours, right?
Yes.
Um, anybody could go through the Tomb of Horrors, and you know millions of adventurers have,
Yes.
but only your character could be sent to retrieve a soul gem to from the Tomb of Horrors to free their kingdom or something like that, right? So making the adventure belong to your characters, making it their story, um, is a great way to flesh things out and make it
It
special,
makes it
make it more
unique.
special than
Like,
yeah,
even though we went through Storm King's Thunder, the things you added to Storm King's Thunder were very unique and different for our group. Like, there is no other group that would go through the cloud fortress like we did. There's no other group that would
yeah,
have these different NPCs that would interact with the main story, but at the same time impact things. And it's by adding these age or adding different flavored pre-mades in,
Mhm.
like you said, it makes it your own. The players become more invested as well.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
like when you're using their bonds, their ideals, flaws, and traits, your players become interested because suddenly you are focused on them. Their
Yeah.
their character becomes the main character for a little while in the main quest or in this massive camp.
Yeah. And really, all that really requires is looking for connections. And the great thing about it is the more you pull from the players, the less work you're doing yourself. You don't have to sit and think of what would be an interesting thing to do. What am I going to do this week? It's well, your characters' bonds, ideals, flaws, and traits have written down what they want their characters to do. If you read through the lines,
It's
um,
there.
yeah,
You might have to expand
and
on it a little bit, but it's there.
yeah. But I mean, in some ways, the BIFs and even just like class alignment, race choices are your characters or your players literally requesting, I would like to go on this type of an adventure. It just needs a little interpretation. But imagine, for a minute that you're creating your campaign from whole cloth. You're not taking like something like Storm King's Thunder. A good way to build uh, using pre-made adventures is to like just grab the next three that you want to run,
Yes.
right, and go through them. You don't have to like go super detailed through them, but get a a big picture idea of what they're about and what their general story is, and then look at ways you can tie them together. So, for example, if you have three adventures that are all around goblins, make them all the same band of goblins,
Right.
and suddenly you've got a goblin invasion campaign, right?
Yeah.
Instead of this week you're going down this hole against those goblins, and this week you're going down that hole against those goblins. Instead, what you've got is this epic story of the goblins versus you know your kingdom.
Well, yeah, and it makes it
Um,
flow better because if it's the same group of goblins, the same camp of goblins, you're not going, okay, so I'm going in this direction. Okay, we're done with these goblins. Time to go in this
yeah,
direction. You are going from one camp to the other, and they are the same groups of goblins, and you can find clues in one camp that leads to, okay, this is not the main camp of these goblins,
mm,
or or the leader or the captain of the goblins was not here. This is just a side group of these goblins,
yeah,
and it flows better. And not only does
yeah,
it flow better, but it keeps you on track better. Now, I have a terrible time with this because once I got done with the previous quest and Everkeep, I'm like, well, I don't know what to do next. But if you have a uh, three adventure arcs,
mm,
you know what to do next. You know what to go into next. You already have that idea there, and it should
yeah.
flow one into the other.
Mm. And you don't have to do the hard next session prepping of the whole arc. Prep only what you're going to need for the next session, or maybe that and a little more. I like to have like a 125% prep, so that when you guys say, you know what, we're going to skip that encounter altogether. I'm not
Screw that
sitting there
encounter
going,
in particular.
ah! Yeah. So I like to prep a little more than I expect to actually use, but don't go nuts with it. You don't want to be prepping now for an adventure your characters won't get to for 3 levels.
Right.
You don't need the stats for the baddies. You don't need the maps.
And things will change by
Uh,
then. If you
yeah,
plan that, if
yeah,
you plan too far in ahead, your players will probably go in a different direction that you didn't anticipate at that point.
yeah. And then you either have to throw all that work away, or you have to railroad them into going on the adventure you prepped, and neither of those are good options. So, but going back to the recurring elements, another thing you can do if you've got a three adventure arc, and then three is not a magic number; it's just sort of handy.
It could be
It's a little more
4,
robust than
5.
two, and it's not as
It's easy to keep
insane
in
as
mind.
six. Yeah. So, but what you could do is figure out who is like the villain, the big baddie of the third adventure,
Right.
right? And then look from their point of view at the first and second adventures and say, okay, how are their fingers involved in this? And you can plant clues, or you can change the setup so that it turns out that the goblin chief was actually conducting all of these raids in order to send tribute to the mind flayer, right? Whatever your setup
Right.
is. Um, and like I say, you can plant these clues early on so that when your characters are fighting the goblins and they discover that, there's this pit full of goblins that have all had their brains sucked out. It doesn't have anything to do with what's going on
It's
now. It's
just
just this piece of
it's weird.
weirdness.
Why is that there? Well, it's because
Yeah.
you have these
Two adventures later, there's a mind flayer there with goblin skulls all around his
surprise.
neck, and the players are like,
That's
"Oh,
right.
it's all connected." They start,
Yeah.
putting the red strings together, etc. So, and you can also do this is something that WotC likes to do is you can take your boss from 3 adventures down and have them show up early on in some way that they can't be hurt or they're too powerful for the characters to deal with or
Or
whatever.
you don't even know.
Have them,
Like you don't even know
yeah,
that that's the big bad. Maybe they're just watching you.
yeah, have them do something menacing or something that's memorable. And then when they show up again later, the players are like, "Oh my gosh, it
It
was
was
them
them
all
all
along."
along.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's kind of what you see a lot of in Final Fantasy or various RPG tropes is where you run into the big bad very early and they kick your butt.
yeah,
And then later on you
yeah,
find out, oh, they're the big bad we're trying to deal
yeah,
with.
yeah. And in terms of classic D&D adventures, the Against the Giants series, the original, not the modern Storm King's Thunder, although that's good too, but the original Against the Giants, the steading of this Hill's Giant Chief and all of that became Going Against the Drow later, is kind of built this way. If you look at them individually, they're just, this is a cave full of hill giants, and this is a fort full of hill giants, and this is a dungeon full of fire giants, and this is a cave full of frost giants. And individually, the adventures
They're not
they're
really
perfectly good standalone
right,
adventures.
but they're not connected.
Um, they're not. They don't have to be connected. But if you want to run them as a campaign, which is how it was intended, there are there are breadcrumbs along the way, uh, and then the intention was to segue into Going Against the Drow next. So you know somewhere in the third adventure, or I think the second or third adventure, suddenly there's this mysterious figure pulling the strings, and they're like, who is this mysterious figure? In the third adventure, there it is, and it's a drow, and everybody's like,
Oh
oh my
no. Well, we
goodness,
should have
the
known.
giants were working for the drow all along. So
Yeah, it's like
it seems like,
it's
it seems like this long built up story, and really it's just
arcs after arc after arc. So you're building up
yeah,
into it's the same arc, but it's the next arc. It's the next arc. It's the next part of the arc. It's
yeah. And the same way that you build an arc out of 3 adventures, you could build a campaign out of 3 arcs,
right.
right? You could have arcs of arcs. And so you think about, okay, this adventure has a boss. Who's their boss? And
And then who's their
the
boss?
boss's boss has a boss. Who's that boss? There's always a bigger fish,
Yes, it's always a
right?
bigger fish.
Yeah. And in D&D, if you want to have a full campaign that runs to 20, at some point the boss is going to be somebody like Tiamat or Demogorgon or somebody like that, right? Um,
Yeah, who knows? Some ancient dragon, some ancient Dracolich, maybe.
yeah, and whoever you like, some ridiculously powerful world-eating
Thing.
menace. But at first level, your characters are, you, you know,
Yeah.
nothing to do with me. I'm a farmer with a sword,
I'm dealing with
so
some gnolls. What do you want from me?
yeah, yeah. But if you have put in a little thought beforehand and think you're eventually going to be going up against Tiamat, then your farmer with a sword, you know, you don't throw him against
No.
Tiamat, but you could have dragon cultists.
Yes. Just random,
Um,
dragon cultists coming by and deciding, oh, you know what? Your farm is a really great place to put an altar out here.
yeah,
So, and then
yeah,
suddenly the farmer is in the thick of it. It's like, well, I don't want this to happen. And then now it's
yeah,
like, well, you've got to find out why they're doing this,
Yeah,
or you go on a revenge quest.
yeah. And a good model to look at that particular thing in Tiamat is Red Hand of Doom from third edition,
Yes,
where
I've heard this come
um,
up a lot.
yeah, well, Red Hand of Doom is a really good adventure. Actually, it's one of the sort of quiet classics of modern D&D. But the end boss, spoiler, the end boss of Red Hand of Doom is, well, there's sort of two. You fight an aspect of Tiamat if everything goes pear shaped,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Um, and that's at like 10th or 12th level, so that's a hairy
That's
fight.
yeah,
But
that's considerable.
um, yeah, but the main boss of the campaign is this hobgoblin, half dragon hobgoblin warlord named Azarkul,
That's a
who
name.
is the son of Tiamat.
Oh,
Right? She has given birth to this uh, warlord, um, and he's sending off. He has like a bunch of generals, and the generals all have their little mini adventures. And so your first uh, encounter in the campaign is a rabble of hobgoblins
right,
on the road.
right,
The only thing that's notable about them is that they all have this sort of red hand stamp on their face, like the Urukai, um, and nobody knows what it is. Nobody knows what it means. Could be anything. So you get attacked by these goblins. Maybe they're the Red Hand tribe. Nobody knows what it means. And you go into town, um, and you get sent on another adventure. It's been a long time, but my memory is you get sent on another adventure where these goblins with the red hands on their faces have been attacking towns, and so the town you get to, um, and like, well, good job taking care of the rabble on the road. Can you please go to the bigger town and give them word that we need some help? And
right.
so you go to the bigger town, having bigger fights along the way, um, with other monsters that just happen to be around. When you get to the big town, they're like, yeah, we've seen other goblins with this red hand, and they're marching on this bridge, and so you have to go and
It's a
defend
bigger
the
problem
bridge or
than we
destroy
thought.
the bridge. Yeah, when you get to the bridge, there's like this whole advancing army of monsters, and you have to destroy the bridge to keep them from
Or die.
attacking the town. Yeah.
Like you can't really take them
So
on yourself.
yeah. So my point is that all these sort of seemingly unrelated or just sort of tangentially related things all go back eventually to this warlord, who's the big boss. But they're not like his direct orders.
Right,
It's the chain of command, and so all of that is stuff where you prep the part you need today,
right.
thinking about how it relates to what's coming later, but not dependent on it. And some good options for just like looking for ideas. Uh, if you're just sitting there looking at a pre-made and you're like, I don't know what I want to do with this. Um, there's a prominent blog, probably anybody watching this has heard of, is called Sly Flourish
Yes,
or the Lazy Dungeon Master.
definitely
One of
recommended.
his great ideas, yes, Sly Flourish is awesome, and actually he lives somewhere in the same state as I do. And on one of these days, I want to
You're just gonna run into him
meet him
someday.
at a gaming store. So, yep, yep. Oh, I may have already at Game Parlor or something and didn't know it. But anyway, um, where was I going with? Oh, the Sly Flourish has a concept of 10 secrets. And he suggests coming up with a new set of 10 secrets at the beginning of every session. I think that's kind of a lot.
That's a lot. I feel like
Um,
that's a lot.
yeah,
I feel like maybe 4 or 5,
yeah.
and then have 10 big ones for the entire campaign. Whereas,
Mm.
or come up with
Well,
one or two per each session, and they
yeah.
build
Well,
up.
well, the point of the 10 secrets idea is that they give you a new direction to throw the adventure. If things are stuck or you just don't know what to do next, pull out one of your secrets and have the characters discover it, and suddenly it takes the adventure in a whole new direction. And the idea is that uh, these secrets only become true if the characters discover them.
Ah,
So you have your list of things that could be true. So starting again with the goblin encounter at the beginning of Red Hand of Doom, you fought a bunch of hobgoblins on the road with this tattoo. So a potential list of secrets could be they're secretly the vanguard of a army led by a warlord. Another secret could be, they're actually, they've been displaced by a giant and they want to find a new home, or they're being mind controlled by an aboleth in a swamp. Just a bunch of stuff that any of it could be true. None of it has to be
It
true.
may not be true at all.
Yeah. But just, you know, a handful. I'd say 5 or 6 is more than enough for any given
Yeah.
session, at least. Especially if you're gonna like throw them away at when they don't get
You
used
can
and
you can
start a
reuse
new
them. You
session.
don't know when a secret might come back, or you might be able to
Yeah,
use it for some other.
yeah. The point of making them disposable is that you don't start actually thinking of them as being true, right?
Right.
The whole point is that they're not true until the players make it true, which I think is an interesting direction. But
Good, good way to take it.
yeah, another idea of ways to flesh out your story. It was also I heard from Sly Flourish, although he got it from another game. It's called a campaign front,
Okay.
and what a front is, in war, you've got the Eastern Front, the Western Front. You've got boundaries that are moving as armies push back and forth.
Right.
Not so much in modern warfare in the era of cruise missiles, but in the old days of war when
There were
armies
different
marched
fronts.
across
Yeah.
countries. Yes. And so if you look at Storm King's Thunder, as I've been running it, or I mean it's on hold now, but as I ran it, so you had a couple different fronts. You had um, the fire giants
Right.
trying to create their enormous dragon-killing Voltron.
Right.
That was one front. Another front was the villain, the Blue Dragon Imrith,
Right.
um, and her attempts to undermine the Storm Court and basically get them all to kill each other through infighting.
Right.
That was a front. And I also had uh, sort of the personal fronts going on for each character. So uh, Lee's character had his development by this weird mentor angel character who was harassing him. That was a front.
It was training.
Yeah, on the job training in a very tough love
Very
kind
tough
of manner.
love.
But yeah, so all of these fronts are related to each other, but they could also be taken as individual things. And so whenever I needed to come up with what's the next session,
Just look at your different
I could
fronts.
yeah, I could pick, what's on the front. And the way a front works is you figure out what's going to happen if the players don't get involved. You know, assuming the players are nowhere in there, the campaign was just going on its
Mm.
own. The fire giants have this thing, and they need to find all the pieces. They need to get a hot enough fire to restoke the flame. They need to figure out how to control it. Assuming all of that stuff falls into place, they're going to set it loose on the countryside and have it go killing every dragon it
They'll have a
finds.
grand old time, smashing everything in its way.
Yep. Yep. Good dragons, bad dragons, don't
Doesn't
care.
matter.
Is a dragon
Kill it.
fantasy Voltron is going to kill it. Eventually, if that goes on, the dragons will start fighting back, and you'll have an all-out war between the giants and the dragons.
And you don't really want that.
And
So that's something that
yeah,
the
and all the little folk in between are just going to be stepped on.
that's something that the characters probably don't want, and you probably
Yeah.
want to deal with those fronts on some point.
Yeah. So that's what the front looks like. And at any given point, you know where you are in the front. You know where the front is going to go, unless and until the characters do something about
Right.
it. And you don't want to have too many fronts because otherwise the characters get
Right.
paralyzed. They're like,
I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing at this
Yeah.
point.
I can't go deal with that problem, or the world is going to end because the giants and dragons are going to go to war. I can't. So you have to keep it manageable. Going back to Skyrim, you've got the Alduin, you've got the Civil War. Those are the big fronts, right? Those are Skyrim is a little different because no adventure happens until you actually interact with it. But imagining a Skyrim where the Civil War had a schedule and Alduin had a schedule, right? And you had to
You had to go between them and try to keep
Yeah.
everything from falling apart. I would play that game. It'd be a
Well, I
little
mean, lots of
hectic,
games
but
are written that way. Yeah, lots of games written out that like that, and anything that has a countdown timer to the end, and you have to work your adventure in. Um, but if you have too many fronts, what happens is the characters, the players basically like, well, if we do this, that happens. If we do this, that happens. We're screwed. There's no winning scenario, right? They have to have room in order to be able to find victory.
And I feel like we
Um,
run into that problem a little bit with the Burning Coast, where we have the main front of this ticking time of people dying,
yeah,
and the wasting curse wasting away everyone, or not
yeah,
everyone who has died before. And so
yeah,
when a
and
new
certainly your
front,
patron.
and suddenly we have a new front, well, we can't because there's this ticking time clock. We have to deal with this. So more friends coming
Yeah,
in. No, we have to deal with this,
yeah,
which is why we
yeah.
completely ignored one front.
Yeah, the Burning Coast, which Burning Coast is Tomb of Annihilation for those who are interested
Yes.
in Tomb of Annihilation. Um, Tomb of Annihilation does have this issue of the main the main quest, which is designed to put enough pressure on the players that they don't just faff around all the time, puts a little too much pressure on it. Because if you got an NPC that you like and you care about, and you know that they've got 82 hit points and they're losing a hit point every day until they die,
Yeah.
which is how the mechanic is supposed to work in Tomb of Annihilation. And as I'm not running it that way, I'm doing it slightly different. But in the adventure as written, you're given this patron who's this sort of kindly old wizard, um, and the wizard is like losing a hit point every day. And when the wizard hits 0 hit points, they die and they get sucked into the
Right.
soulmonger.
That's a big
Uh,
front. Like you're being told this
yeah,
guy will die forever if you don't do this, if you don't solve us. And many,
yeah,
like thousands, hundreds of thousands also will. Not hundreds of thousands,
yeah.
but many.
I don't know how many people get raised from the dead in the average D&D world, but certainly not a not insignificant number. Um,
But it's a really large front with a ticking time bomb. So it really makes
yeah,
it difficult to bring in other fronts. That's something to
yeah,
consider when you're taking on the front
yeah.
technique.
So you do, unless you want the campaign to be super laser focused on destroy the ring before Sauron covers the earth.
That'd have been a
Um,
really boring story if it was just you must destroy the ring at all costs.
yeah, you want to have enough breathing room. Your fronts. You want your fronts to matter. You want things to give the characters a reason to keep going. You know, but you don't want it to be so much pressure that they feel like they have to
Right.
go down the plot railroad, or everything will go to crap. Um, and again, the whole point of the front is to give you an idea of what to do
Right.
next when you're stuck, right? So you want to expand the adventure. You
You add a
have
front.
Yeah, or you bring in something from one of your existing fronts. Front building is most of the time is going to be done at the beginning of the campaign, or when you're like nearing the end of one arc and want to figure out your next arc, then you'll build your front then.
But I think
So
that when it comes to expanding the adventure, one of the best ways is take from the players. Take things they've done.
yeah, it
Take
really is.
things either from their backstory or they've done along the way, and it gets them invested. And
Yeah,
it's there.
some baddie who got away two
Yeah,
adventures ago suddenly is back again with
it's
reinforcements.
already there.
Or
It's already happened.
yeah,
It's something there you can take from and expand from, and you can go on forever because you
or
have
somebody they
yeah
rescued. You guys did such a great job with this. Now I have that.
yes.
Something. So anyway, so that has been expanding the written adventure. Hope it was helpful. And if you have more, if you have specific questions about the process, please let us
It's
know.
helped me.
We
I need to get
can do
back
a
to
follow up.
Everkeep, so this might help me a bit.
Well, I'm pleased. I'm still wrangling with what to do about Tomb of Annihilation for myself. So, but anyway, so topics for next time.
Right.
We still have Game Master Credo on the list, and we haven't touched it
Nope.
yet. We're 10 episodes in.
we
Um,
are we ever going to touch it? Is this going to be something that's on the list forever, and we just never do it?
Maybe. I mean, we'll see. We also have another viewer requested topic of making the game fun for the
which
DMs.
is
Um,
extremely important because if the DM is not having fun, if they're not enjoying themselves, it will show in the game. It
yeah,
will
it really
definitely
will.
show, and your players will stop having fun.
Yeah. I've actually been seeing a lot in the D&D vlogosphere about this particular topic recently, so I don't know if it's we have anything to add, but we'll give it a
We can
shot if
definitely
you really
try. We
want.
try to keep things
Yep.
interesting for ourselves, and if we're not having fun, well, we're not going to play this week. We'll
Yep.
remix something and come back to it later.
Yep. And the third possible topic we have suggested is remixing, respecking, or retiring. I'm starting my new character in Plotline's game tonight because I just was not happy with Ico. Um, Sometimes characters just don't work, and
Sure.
it may be a thing where you can do rebuild them in a way that where the mechanics will better support your idea, or maybe you take them in a new direction. Being a rogue has been fun, but I don't really feel very stabby anymore. So maybe my character will switch over to start taking levels in Bard and become a more of a raconteur or something.
And I'll
Um,
be doing the same with my own character, bringing a different one that goes off of Artificer, and I will be remixing some things into creating Gunblade Artificer.
yeah,
So it'd be
yeah,
entertaining.
and sometimes, like with Ico, sometimes a character just doesn't work, and
Work.
you want
It
to
doesn't happen. It
let them go,
happens. You
and
know,
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with
So
that.
yeah. So any of those topics that interest you, or if there's something else you would really like us to cover that we haven't brought up, yep, comment. Um, we love to hear from everybody. And it's YouTube, so like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, blah blah blah. I'm sure you've heard it all
They're
before.
over there.
Um,
I'm
yeah,
not sure which direction. Depends on where
and
Nietzsche puts my head.
well, I usually put you over there, I think.
So they're over there.
Yeah.
Wait,
Well,
unless
they're
I'm
they're
flipped.
they're directly below you.
So they're over there.
They're directly below you.
Unless I'm flipped today, in which case they're over there.
Yeah. In any case, I also want to plug my Patreon because that's how I make my living. You can get art, you can get writing, you can get videos, whatever's going on in any given week.
And I
Um,
will plug my Twitch. I stream video games, VR games, open world games, Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. And
yeah.
come by, be entertained, just hang out. This basically we're just playing games with friends. Is basically what it's like.
Yep. All right. And thank you for coming,
Thank
everybody.
you for
And we will
watching.
see you next time. All right.
Start recording again. But wait, I have to stop recording again to make sure this recording sounds good.
Hey, hey, hey. We're never going to get anywhere.